fucking CNN, Fox News, BBC, ABC, CNBC, all of them ripping families apart. Maybe it needs to happen, I suppose, if the family's shit to begin with, but come on. Why are you listening to these fuckers? All of them. You don't have to pick a side. They're all shit. These mainstream media moguls. Case in point. You better keep it down over there. Okay. Come over and tell me. I'm doing good. It's good? It's good? Okay, cool. Thanks. We've come a long way at the Beaumont Motel. We've come a long way. Oh boy, that was nice to... Mumbling to myself. Oh. Hoo-ah. Riveting. I thought it was better than Cats. Excuse me. Bacon. Excuse me. Sorry. Let's make it rain bacon. Movie time! Movie time? Oh, excuse me. Here we go again. Welcome to another episode of Tea in Space. My name's Tom. This is Space. And we've been live for the last 10 minutes, 37 seconds. It's 11:19 p.m. on Wednesday, October 28th, 2023. You should be getting this now. Oh, hey there. All synced up? Good. Cue up Ram Dass. He's cute.
He's crying and the man's patting his head and smiling. And I take a look at the scene and it's quite beautiful, but I'm too bugged to really appreciate it. And I think, well, I'm not going to touch his feet. I mean, you know, we don't do that in the West. So I sort of stood back figuring, well, I would just be an observer. I'm just a passenger in the car. I don't have to do it. After a little while, this old man pulled his hair and he said to him, have you got a picture of me? And the boy said, yeah. And he said, well, give it to him. So I thought, gee, that's very nice, you know. This little old man's going to give me a picture of himself. And I smiled, thank you very much, you know. See, there was a guy who would translate. The school principal was one of the 8 people. And he would sort of say everything in English after this. Then he looked up at me, and I was still, like, very uptight. He looked up at me, and he said, you came in a big car? Like the one topic, see, that I'm uptight about. So I said, yeah. He said, you'll give it to me? So I started to say, well, and this young fellow said, Maharaji, if you want it, it's yours. And I said, now, wait a minute. You can't go giving away David's car. It's not our car to give away. This little old man says to me, you made much money in America? So I said, yeah, one time I made. He said, how much did you make? So I was like into bragging. I needed something for my ego. I said, well, one year I made $25,000. So they all figured that out in rupees, and everybody was impressed. It's like 60 billion rupees or something like that. So he said, you'll buy a car like that for me? Now, I grew up in a family that was very involved with Jewish charities, and I knew about getting money, but I had never been hustled so fast in my life. I didn't even know who he was, and he was already asking me for a $7,000 car. And he's smiling at me all the time. He's putting me on. That's really what it boils down to. So I say, well, perhaps. And then he says, take them away, give them food. And we're taken off and given food. Big sumptuous feast. At the end of the feast, we rest, and then we're brought back to him. And he says, come sit. So I go and sit down. He said, you were out under the stars last night. You were thinking about your mother. Yeah. She died last year. Closed his eyes for a second. She got very big in the stomach before she died. Yeah. Spleen. She she died of spleen. When he said that, two things happened to me. One was that my mind raced faster and faster and faster through every conceivable CIA super paranoia I could conceive of to figure out what was happening to me. I mean, who was putting me on? Like, had they brought me here? Was this some monstrous training program? And a dossier was spread behind this little man. He pushed a button, and the ground opened up, and I mean, like, that's very far out, because even the guy I was traveling with didn't know that stuff. And I was just a passenger in the car. You know, boy, they're really good at their game. And I went through, like, what are the probabilities, you see? Because, see, in the past, I was in this position that when things like this happened, they didn't happen to me usually. They happened to somebody else, and I said, well, that's nice. We certainly have to keep an open mind about those things. And when it did happen to me, I was always out of my head on psychedelics, and how did I know it had happened and I hadn't just created the whole thing out of whole cloth? Because I had taken some psychedelics that did that kind of thing. I remember taking a thing called JB318. And I was sitting in a room and nothing was happening, and I thought, gee, nothing much happens with this drug, does it? Even though the fellow I took it with, who was about 50, was doing cartwheels through the room. But I felt nothing. And then this girl from the community I was living in walked in and she said, would you like some lemonade? And I said, that would be great. And she poured this glass of lemonade, and it got to the top, and she kept pouring, and it went over the side.
Where's the best
down the
post
side,
office in
across the wall,
town?
and up the wall, and across the ceiling,
Over there.
and down under my
Hey,
pants,
okay.
and then it went back up, and my pants got wet, and I moved, and then it went back up, and as it touched the glass disappeared, and the girl disappeared, and my wet pants were no longer wet, and I turned to Ralph Metzner, who was sitting next to me, and I said, Ralph, you know, the most unusual thing just happened to me. And Ralph disappeared. And thus I was perfectly willing when the people at Harvard said, you people have been taking these drugs, you are therefore not reputable scientists anymore as observers. And I was perfectly delighted to say, I will be data. Study me, and it may be, it's too bad what happened to those guys in the 60s at Harvard, you know. So my mind went faster and faster and faster, and then it went through every desperate ploy and search through all the storage units. And then, just like a computer that has been fed an insoluble problem, finally, so the machine doesn't burn out entirely, the light comes on, a bell rings, and the machine stops. And that is what happened. My mind just gave up. And simultaneously, and this was not, I couldn't experience it as cause and effect. All I experienced it was the simultaneity of it. He was looking right at me and sort of just looking right at me. I felt this very violent tugging sensation in my chest. It was very painful. And I started to cry. And I cried, and I cried, and I cried. And I wasn't happy, and I wasn't sad. The closest I could come to description of feelings was like, I'm home, or it's over, or whew, or it's all right, or wow, that kind of thing. Cried and cried and cried, and they took me away. And I was taken to a temple about 12 miles away, and I was given a nice room, and I was sitting in the room, and during the evening I was very confused, and at one point I was going through my shoulder bag, and I came to the bottle of LSD. I thought, this guy is going to know what LSD is, because he knows everything. I'll have to ask him. Next morning at 8 o'clock, messenger comes, Maharaji wants to see you. We go over the 12 miles to the temple. I'm just approaching him about 5-6 yards away from him, and he yells out, have you got a question? And I take one look at him, and all I want to do is touch his feet. I don't have any question. It's so warm and beautiful, and so much light coming out of him. And I say, no, I don't have any question. And he says, he gets very impatient. And he says, where's the medicine? Medicine? So Guru brother says, well, maybe he means the LSD. I said, LSD? Acha, the LSD. Bring the LSD. So I go and I bring the bottle of LSD. I hold out my hand. He wants to see. So I hold out my hand and pour it in. He says, well, what's that? I said, well, that's LSD. And what's that? That's STP, and that's Librium, and that's Tuinol, and, you know, it's my traveling kit. In those days, I hasten to add, for the benefit of the people whose business it is to protect us from those kind of traveling kits. And he says, does it give you siddhis? And I didn't know what the word siddhis meant. And I said siddhis, and it was translated as powers to me. And I didn't realize it was spiritual powers. I thought he was asking for physical power. I thought he wanted something like vitamin B12. And I didn't have anything like that, and I was really depressed, because I really wanted to give him whatever he wanted. I mean, I would have given him anything at that point. He could have the Land Rover if he wanted. So I said, gee, I'm sorry, I don't have that. And I poured it back into the bottle, and I was very sad. No, no, no. And he holds out his hand. So I put one pill in his hand, and these are called White Lightning, and they were about 275 micrograms of LSD, but these were a special batch that had been made for me as a going-away present, and they were each 305 micrograms. He looked, and he, come on. So I put a second on his hand. That was 610 micrograms. For a 70-year-old man, you usually, you know, like 150 under suitable conditions. Can't be too careful with it. You know about the heart. And he looks and says, come on, come on. So I put a third one. That's 915. That's going to do it. I mean, it's good LSD. And he looks, acha, and he downs the whole business. And the scientist in me says, well, this is going to be interesting. And all day I hung around, and every now and then he'd twinkle at me. And of course, nothing happened at all. So that was the answer to that question. He continued to manifest these, what we in the West call miracles. Certainly the capacity to know everything I was thinking at all times. And lest ye see wonders and miracles ye will not believe, and that certainly was helping. But it was only a more trivial part of the whole undertaking, it turned out. I never left the temple. I just stayed there. They took me over. They didn't ask me if I wanted to stay. There were no contracts, no promises, no anything. They just bought my clothes and put me in a room. And I met this man who then became my teacher, who was a disciple of the Gurus. No place to hide. My teacher had gone into the jungle when he was 8 years old. 15 years ago, he had met the Guru in the jungle. They were both called jungle sadhus. That is, they lived in caves way back in the forest. They didn't have any commerce with people. And he was a very pure Brahmin, the teacher. He weighs about 90 pounds. He's very tiny. He's a very unusual fellow. He's got his jeta piled high. His hair goes all the way down to his ankles, but it's all kept piled on his head. He moves incredibly fast. He's always rushing around. He has architecturally designed. See, what happens is this guru, who is just this little old man in a blanket, he just hangs out, see? And he sort of just hangs out. He doesn't do anything except just talk to people, and people feed him. And he just does his thing in a very subtle way. And the devotees like having him around so much because he's so high that they sort of guard him. Because if they let him go, he'd sort of walk off and maybe nobody would see him again. And they have a car for him, and he just keeps disappearing here and there with a car and goes different places. And everywhere he goes, people rush up to touch his feet and be around him. And then all these people bring him money and gifts and stuff, and he doesn't have any use for that. He's got no game going. So then these people who bring him the gifts, they set up foundations to take care of the gifts. And then they say to him, Maharaji, what should we do? And he comes and he points to a place and says, build a temple. Because the great saints had lived in that cave, we'll build a temple in the cave. And this teacher designs all of them. He architecturally designs them, supervised the building, ran the temples and the schools and the whole business. He taught me, he reads and writes. He's silent. He's been silent for 15 years. He reads and writes 6 or 8 languages. He has many followers of his own. His food intake for 15 years, and I lived with him and I saw what he was taking. His food intake for 15 years was 2 glasses of milk a day. That's it. He is a scrupulously honest, perfect guy. He is not, you wouldn't consider him a realized being. He's caught in what's called the golden chain, the sattvic chain, the chain of being pure. He's being good. And he taught me everything, and he taught me so subtly. He taught me so subtly that I never knew I was being taught anything. He would walk in into my room where I was alone most of the time. I ate alone, I lived alone, and I was left very much with my thoughts, right on the edge of freaking out all the time. He'd walk in and he'd write on the slate, if you wear shoe leather, the whole earth is covered with leather. And then he'd walk out. Then if you hadn't gotten that message, and he felt you hadn't gotten that message, he'd send you another one. He'd say, if a pickpocket meets a saint, he'd write, he sees only his pockets. Then he'd leave for the day. And it was only later that I realized that he had taught me a very, very exquisitely articulated system that is several thousand years old at least, which is called Patanjali's system of Ashtanga Yoga, or 8-limbed yoga. It's also sometimes known as Raja Yoga. Because I never thought he was teaching me anything. I thought we were just hanging out and he was saying these like groovy things on his chalkboard. And he never gave me the feeling that he was saying anything to me that was new. It was all, sure, of course, you know. Right, that's the way it is.
Space. My name's Tom.
The yoga consists of 8 limbs.
Space.
The first 2 limbs are purification. The third limb concerns the body, asanas, which you sometimes know of as hatha yoga. The fourth limb concerns pranayama, or control of pran, or life force or energy through breath control.
Canada, just outside of...
And the 5th through the 8th concern
just
methods
outside
of control of mind.
British Columbia, Canada.
And all I can say to you is, as a reasonably competent social scientist, I have never yet seen such an exquisitely articulated system.
4.5 hours away from Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada.
And furthermore, I would say to you that it works.
Tell me more. Kumbuktu, Vicky Day, 6 other people.
The schedule, the life I led in the temple, very simply, was I'd get up around 4:30 in the morning. I would go to the river to take my bath with a lota pouring water over me, barefoot through the snow, rush back to the puddle by my coal brazier, do breath pranayama, do asanas, do meditation, take tea in the morning, meditate in the morning and read holy books. He would come and teach me around 11, then I would do more asanas, breathing, then I would take my meal for the day alone, then I would rest and have fantasies of being somewhere else, like on the Riviera lying in the sun, a beautiful girl feeding me grapes. And then I would study some more, or read, or write. And then people would come, we'd sing holy songs, and then I would do breathing again, and then asanas again, and then meditation, and I'd take some warm milk, and I'd go to bed.
There's a terrible disease going around infecting millions of people. It's highly contagious, creating the worst pandemic the world's ever seen. If we don't act now, it's going to keep spreading, potentially infecting everyone. The disease is a mental condition called intelligence.
Most dangerous disease in the world.
Intelligence is a very contagious disease spreading around the globe at unprecedented rates. It's threatening to destroy the world as we know it. Symptoms of intelligence include thinking for yourself, elevated levels of self-responsibility, nuanced thought, the desire for freedom, acts of bravery, and an intolerance to being controlled by fear. We don't know much about intelligence, how it works, or how it spreads, but there's very strong evidence it's easily transmitted through ideas, self-expression, and human connection. Together, we can slow the spread of intelligence, but we all must practice strict obedience to the following guidelines. Socially distance yourself from critical thought. Sanitize your mind with the news. Rely on other people to tell you what's true for you.
That's right.
And wear a face suffocator to reduce the amount of oxygen going to your brain.
That's silly.
Additionally, we'll need to permanently shut down the economy to fight this dangerous infection with the weapons of poverty and despair. We're also working with our partners at the social media giants who are strongly committed to ending intelligence by censoring free speech on their platforms.
Mark
If you find
Zuckerberg,
yourself accidentally thinking for yourself or think you may
eh?
have
What's
come in
he
contact
doing?
with someone infected with intelligence, please self-quarantine in front of the news for 14 days and seek the medical guidance of your local computer programmer. With this infection, it's also advisable to put your
Ain't that
entire
the
trust in
truth?
the hands of people who, in the past, have been found guilty in antitrust lawsuits, and to outsource your entire thinking, well-being, and choices to people who aren't you. It's your social duty to help out and do your part. If we all work together, we can rid the world of intelligence once and for all. One more thing, you beautiful weirdo. I want to thank Primally Pure Deodorant for sponsoring this video. Now, not to sound too superficial, but I don't like to smell bad. That's why I've had such a big problem with natural deodorants. A lot of them look good on paper, but in reality, function horribly, and I end up smelling badly. And I also don't like to poison myself in order to not smell badly. That's why I refuse to use commercial deodorants. That's why Primally Pure has stepped in and solved a massive smelly problem for me. It's all natural, which I love, but it also works, which I really love. Primally Pure keeps me smelling fresh all day long while keeping me true to my healthy values. Plus, its nourishing vitamins and essential fatty acids with anti-inflammatory properties helps improve the health of my skin, leaving my pits smooth and protected, aka happy pits. If you want to join me in using Primally Pure to smell great all day long while staying healthy, just go to primallypure.com/JP to get yours.
Where is he? Ah, there he is. Meet me on the 7th floor. Oh my. I can't wait. You little fucker. He's fast. Laurel and Hardy, and Buster Keaton. Good trio. Oh, oh man, look at that. Oh, the elevator went out through the roof. It went through the roof. Yeah. And that, my friends, is the goat. Thank you. Thanks for coming out. Next.
But really, are we that far away from each other that we can't visit now?
What are you saying, friend? Now, I hear what you're putting down, but, like, what are you saying? Oh, kettle. Kettle. All right.
Buster Keaton and Clyde Bruckman in The General, 1927. Who owns the rights to this?
You do now.
Who do I have to pay to play this?
No payment necessary.
With my friends and family on Facebook.
It's for the public.
Good thing we're on YouTube right now. Is that the pod I hear?
Yeah, I told you that, like, I don't know how fucking long ago. And I've been up a
Coffee
lot
time.
longer than you, fucker. Coffee time! So spry, just got up, eh? Oh yeah, I watched it. I thought it was great. Well, I didn't watch all of it. What'd you watch? 30 seconds. Something like that. I don't know. What do you want from me?
There were two loves in this life.
Yeah.
We've already substituted Brand is.
Give it up for let's not forget David Boone. And of course, our favorite, Jiddu Krishnamurti. Too loud? How to be more effective with your goals. Get anything done. Podcast episode 4. Maybe. What are you trying to get done? I don't know. I'll figure it out. I can still love it. Who am I to say one way or another? Just trying to narrow it down a little bit, that's all. Tiptoe through the tulips. Fucking great speech, eh? Did you hear that pin drop?
And the war is here. Yes, Dad. I'm going to be one of the first to enlist.
What is relevant about this? From anything any white American says, the reason for the political hesitation in spite of the Johnson
Aren't you going
landslide
to enlist?
is the one has been betrayed by American politicians for so long. And I am a grown man, and perhaps I can be reasoned with. I certainly hope I can be. But I don't know.
See ya.
And neither does Martin Luther King. None of us know how to deal with those other people whom the white world has so long ignored, who don't believe anything the white world says, and don't entirely believe anything I or Martin say. And one can't blame them. You watch what has happened to them in less than 20 years. It seems to me that the city of New York, for example, this is my last, we've had Negroes in it for a very long time. If the city of New York were able, as it has in the last 15 years, to reconstruct itself, tear down buildings and raise great new ones, downtown and for money, and has done nothing whatever except build housing projects in the ghetto for the Negroes. And of course the Negroes hate it. Presently the property does indeed deteriorate because the children cannot bear it. They want to get out of the ghetto. If the American pretensions were based on a more solid, a more honest assessment of life and of themselves, it would not mean for Negroes, when someone says urban renewal, that Negroes simply going to be thrown out into the streets, which is what it does mean now. This is not an act of God. We're dealing with a society made and ruled by men. If the American Negro had not been present in America, I am convinced that the history of the American labor movement would be much more edifying than it is. It is a terrible thing for an entire people to surrender to the notion that 1/9 of its population is beneath them. And until that moment, until the moment comes when we, the American people, are able to accept the fact that I have to accept, for example, that my ancestors are both white and black, that on that continent we are trying to forge a new identity for which we need each other, and that I am not a ward of America. I am not an object of missionary charity. I am one of the people who built the country. Until this moment, there is scarcely any hope for the American dream, because the people who are denied participation in it, by their very presence, will wreck it. And if that happens, it's a very grave moment for the West. Thank you.
Standing ovation. Standing ovation. Two of the worst choices to date: Biden or Trump. All right. That's a tough one. Those are choices? Okay. Those are good choices. Excuse me. Thank you. Brought to you by the most trusted name in propaganda, CNN Tonight, with Don Lemon. I am Noam Chomsky. Who rules the world now? Noam. Well, let me tell you. I am Buster Keaton. Buster Keaton in color. 2020, Laurel and Hardy. And how about that Daniel Cordan and all his really nice pitches? They are amazing. Oh. Hey,
Still
kids.
a lot here at SMP. I want to share with you something. See, SMP runs backwards.
Is that Brandon?
Share with you something that doesn't happen every day, but when it does
Brandon
happen,
Snowzell.
you benefit. Okay, so we're we're in the fall 2020.
I wanted that Impala so fucking bad.
We're starting to see some 2021 models on
me.
the lot, but
You told me. It's sold. Nah, you told me already.
This is a 2019 Impala. So, it's the only 2019.
I gots to have me that
Right
Impala.
there. Brand new. Brand new. Okay, so this car, when it was new, was over $40,000. So
Get
like
the
$45,000 brand new is what this car retails for. We're selling it now. I think we actually got it on for $29.99. $29,000. That's an unbelievable deal.
So
For a brand
sweet.
new Impala, leather, loaded up. It's an awesome vehicle. Come down, check it out. Give yourself a happy Thanksgiving gift. Say thank you. And I will
Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
At SMP, come down and see me, Brandon Snowcell. Cheers.
Brandon
Cheers.
Snowcell.
Brandon Snowcell, everybody. It's pretty smoky in here.
going around infecting millions of. There's a terrible disease going around infecting
I heard.
millions of people. It's highly
Intelligence.
contagious, creating the worst pandemic the world's ever seen.
It's the worst.
If we don't act now, it's going to keep spreading, potentially infecting everyone. The disease
hope it
is a
doesn't get
mental
worse.
condition called
We might not need to
intelligence.
create a vaccine for this. I heard this new
Intelligence
vaccine
is
they're
a
working
very
on. It's
contagious
gonna
disease spreading around the globe at
cure
unprecedented
the
rates,
intelligence for sure.
threatening to destroy the world as we know it. Symptoms of intelligence include thinking for yourself, elevated levels of self-responsibility,
window, I think.
nuanced thought, a desire for freedom, acts of bravery, and an intolerance to being controlled by fear. We don't know much about intelligence, how it works, or how it spreads, but there's very strong evidence it's easily transmitted through ideas, self-expression, and human connection. Together, we can slow the spread of intelligence, but we all must practice strict obedience to the following guidelines. Socially distance yourself from critical thought. Sanitize your mind with the news. Rely on other people to tell you what's true for you. And wear a face suffocator to reduce the amount of oxygen going to your brain. Additionally, we'll need to permanently shut down the economy with the weapons of poverty and despair. We're also working with our partners at the social media giants who are strongly committed to ending intelligence by censoring free speech on their platforms. If you find yourself accidentally thinking for yourself or think you may have come in contact with someone infected with intelligence, please self-quarantine in front of the news for 14 days and seek the medical guidance of your local computer programmer. With this infection, it's
See
also
you in about an
advisable to
hour.
put your entire trust in the hands of people who, in the past, have been found guilty in antitrust lawsuits, and to outsource
maybe
your
I'll take a
entire
good
thinking,
break.
well-being, and choices to people who aren't you. It's your social duty to help out
What
and
is
do
this
your
what we're
part.
doing right now?
If we all work together, we can rid the world of intelligence once and for all. One more thing, you beautiful weirdo. I want to thank Primally Pure Deodorant for sponsoring this
Thank
video.
you.
Now, not to sound
I'd like
too
to thank
superficial,
Tom's
but
toothpaste.
I don't like
You know,
to smell
the
bad.
kind without
That's why I have such a
fluoride.
big problem with natural deodorants. A lot of them look good on paper, but
I
in
like
reality,
the use of my
function
pineal
horribly,
gland.
and I end up smelling badly. And I also don't like to poison myself in order to not smell badly.
So-
That's why I refuse to use commercial deodorants. That's why Primally Pure has stepped in and solved a massive smelly problem for me. It's all natural, which I love, but it also works, which I really love. Primally Pure keeps me smelling fresh all day long while keeping me true to my healthy values. Plus, its nourishing vitamins and essential fatty acids with anti-inflammatory properties helps improve the health of my skin, leaving my pits smooth and protected, aka happy pits. If you want to join me in using Primally Pure to smell great all day long while staying healthy, just go to primallypure.com/JP to get yours.
want you to pretend you are delivering on some stage somewhere in the world as though these lines have never been heard before are these. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner still wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave? And I want you to somehow make a certain leap with me. I have one more quotation I want to give you. And this comes from Nietzsche. It comes from Thus Spake Zarathustra, I think. But it's been on my mind all week long. At some point, the man says, I stand before my highest mountain and before my longest journey, and therefore must I descend deeper than I have ever before descended. Now, there are several thousand things that one has got to say in the context that we're speaking, out of which we're speaking. And I suppose the first thing that I have to suggest is that one consider the fact that in the life of a man, the life of a woman, in anybody's life, there are several elements always at work. But the crucial element I want one to consider here is that element of a life which we consider to be an identity. The way in which one puts oneself together, the way one imagines oneself to be, the reality, for example, the invented reality, standing before you now, arbitrarily called Jimmy Baldwin, who contains a great many other things. We have agreed. We have succeeded in striking a certain kind of bargain with the world. This is his name, and this is what he does, and this is who he is. Okay, but that's not it. Beneath that, forever, for everybody, is something else. Is a stranger. The stranger with whom one is forced to deal day in and day out. Forced, in fact, to discover. Forced, in fact, to create, as distinct from invent. Life demands of everyone a certain kind of humility. The humility to be able to make the descent that Nietzsche was talking about. There are two ways, I think. I think there are two ways only to achieve a life or a nation. Let us consider, I'll be personal because I think it may be the easiest way for me to say it, and maybe you'll take my word. And the whole business of communication, of communion, really, is to find some common term to make something mean to you roughly what it means to me. In my life, as I am sure in your life, when one is young, one supposes that there is some way to avoid disaster. If I can spell that out, I mean that when one is young, when I was a little boy, for example, I used to tell my mother, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. I'm going to go here, I'm going to go there. I'm going to be a writer, I'm going to be a fireman. I'm going to do, be this. And Mama would look at me and she would say, it's more than a notion. It took me a long time, a very long time, to begin to realize that she was right and begin to realize what she meant. I, like all of us, thought I knew what I wanted, and thought I knew who I was, and thought that I could do it, and we all do this, whatever it was I wanted, wherever I wanted to go, I thought that I could do it without paying my dues. Because of all the things that one cannot imagine, especially when one's young, is how to pay your dues. You don't even know there are dues to be paid. And later on, one begins to discover, and with great pain, and very much against one's will, that if you want something, whatever it is you want, and whatever it is you want at bottom must be to become yourself. There is nothing else to want. Whatever that is, whatever that journey is, one's got to accept the fact that disaster is a condition under which you will make it. The journey, I mean, not make it in the American sense. And you will learn a certain humility because the terms that you have invented, which you think describe and define you, inevitably collide with the facts of life. And when this collision occurs, and make no mistake, this is an absolutely inevitable collision. When this collision occurs, like two trains in a tunnel, one's got the choice, and it's a very narrow choice, of holding on to your definition of yourself, or saying, as the old folks used to say, and as everybody who wants to live has to say, yes, Lord, which means to say yes to life. Until you can do that, you'll not become a man or a woman. Now, in this country, part of the dilemma, which could become a tragedy, of being what is known somewhat arbitrarily as an American. The collective effort until this moment and the collective delusion until this moment has been precisely my delusion when I was a little boy. That you could get what you wanted and become what you said you were going to be, painlessly. Furthermore, if one examines for a second, or one tries to define the proper noun, American, one will discover, first of all, that to be an American means a catalog of virtues. We have something called I Am an American Day, which I gather is meant to reassure everybody. And to be an American in these terms apparently means, check me out, you think about it. Apparently means that though Greeks, Armenians, Turks, Frenchmen, Englishmen, Scotsmen, Italians may be corrupt, sexual, unpredictable, lazy, evil, a little lower than the angels, we are not. Quite overlooking the fact that the country was settled by Englishmen, Scots, Germans, Turks, and Armenians, a little later to be sure. Every nation under heaven is here. And not, after all, for a very long time. I think that it might be useful, in order to survive our present crisis, to do what any individual does, is forced to do, to survive his crisis, which is to look back on his beginnings. The beginnings of this country, it seems to be, it's a banality to say it, but alas, it has to be said. The beginnings of this country have nothing whatever to do with the myth we have created about it. The country did not come about because a handful of people in Europe, various parts of Europe, said, I want to be free, and promptly built a boat or a raft and crossed the Atlantic Ocean. Not at all. Not at all. In passing, let me remark that the word liberty, the word freedom, are terribly misused words. Liberty is a fact which is also used as a slogan, and freedom may be the very last thing that people want. The very last thing. Anyway, the people who settled the country, the people who came here for one reason, no matter how disguised. They came here because they thought it would be better here than where they were. That's why they came. And that's the only reason that they came. Anybody who was making it in England did not get on the Mayflower. This is important. It is important that one begin to recognize this, because part of the dilemma of this country is that it has managed to believe the myth it has created about its own past, which is another way of saying that it is entirely denied its past. And we all know, if we think about it, what happens to a person who is born, let us say, where I was born, in Harlem, and goes through the world pretending he was born in a certain place. However odd this may sound, also happens to a nation being, when it finally comes into existence, the achievement of the people who make it up. And the quality of the nation being absolutely at the mercy, defined, dictated by the nature and the quality of the people who make it up. In this extraordinary endeavor to create the country called America, a great many crimes were committed. And I want to make it absolutely clear, or as clear as I can make it, that I understand perfectly well that crime is universal and common. And I trust that no one will assume that I am indicting or accusing. I'm not any longer interested in the crime. People treat each other very badly, and always have, and very probably always will. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about denying what one does, which is a much more sinister matter. We did several things in order to conquer the country. There was, at the point we reached these shores, a group of people who had never heard of machines, or as far as I know, of money. I think we would call them now a backward nation, and we promptly eliminated them. We killed them. I'm talking about the Indians, in case you don't know what I'm talking about. Well, people have done this for centuries, but I hazard, I'll bet you, as we say in Harlem, a fat man. There's not many American children being taught American history have any real sense of what that collision was like, or what we really did, how we really achieved the extermination of the Indian, or what that meant. And it is interesting to consider that very few social critics, none to my knowledge, but I say very few, have begun even to analyze the hidden reasons. The cowboy and Indian legend is still one of the most popular legends in American life, so popular that it still, in 1963, dominates the television screen. And I suppose, to finish off that particular item, or to close it for the moment, that all those cowboy and Indian stories are designed to reassure us that no crime was committed. We've made a legend out of a massacre. In which connection, if I may for a moment digress, there used to be an old joke running around among Negroes. If you remember the Lone Ranger, I think he had a sidekick called Tonto, an Indian. There's always a good Indian. He rode around with He rode around with the Lone Ranger, and according to my version of the story, the version I heard, Tonto and the Lone Ranger ran into this ambush of nothing but Indians. And the Lone Ranger said, "What are we going to do, Tonto?" And Tonto said, "What do you mean, we?" Now, slavery, like murder, is one of the oldest human institutions. So we cannot quarrel about the fact of slavery. That is to say, we could, but that's another story. But we enslaved him because in order to conquer the country, we had to have cheap labor. And the man who is now known as the American Negro, who is one of the oldest of American citizens, and the only one who never wanted to come here, did the dirty work. Hold the cotton. Do you hold cotton? No. Chopped cotton, whatever you do with cotton. Pick cotton. Lined track. Helped, in fact, I think it is not too strong a statement to say, but let me put it this way. Without his presence, without that strong back, the American economy, the American nation would have had a vast amount of trouble creating its capital. If one had not had the cat toting the bars and lifting the bales, as we put it, it would be a very different country, and it would certainly be much poorer. And that's all right. But the people I am speaking of who settled the country had a fatal flaw. They could see, they could recognize a man when they saw one. They knew he wasn't. I mean, you can tell. They knew he wasn't anything else but a man. But since they were Christian, and since they had already decided that they came here to establish a free country, and some of them really meant it, by the way, the only way to justify the role this chattel was playing in one's life was to say that he was not a man. Because if he wasn't a man, then no crime had been committed. That is the basis. That lie is the basis of our present trouble. Because that is an extremely complex lie. If on the one hand, one man cannot avoid recognizing another man, it is also true then, obviously, that the man, the black man, who was in captivity and treated like an animal and told that he was one, knew But he was a man and knew that something was wrong. When we got here, those of us who survived the Middle Passage, let me tell you a very small anecdote. I was in Dakar about a year ago in Senegal. Sorry. And just off Dakar, there is a very small island called Gorée, which was once the property of the Portuguese. And it's simply a rock with a fortress. It is the nearest, from Africa, the nearest point to America. On this island, my sister and I went to this island. They had something called the slave house, and we went there to visit it. And the house is not terribly large. Looks a little like houses you see in New Orleans. It's the truth. It's about 2 stories, courtyard, staircase on each side, stone staircase. And the bottom section, which is the first story, I assumed that the captains and the slavers were upstairs. Downstairs were the slave quarters, which were, you walk through a kind of archway. On either side of you, very dark, very low, and this is made of stone, were a series of cells on either side. Stone floor, still rusted iron in the walls. It seemed to me, well, this may be my imagination, but it seemed to me that I could still smell it. What it must have smelled like, with all those human beings chained together in such a place. And remember, they could not speak to each other because they didn't come from the same tribe. On either side, as I say, there were, in this corridor, there were the cells. But straight ahead of you, you come into this archway, and straight ahead of you is a very much smaller doorway made of stone, which opens on the sea. You go to the edge of the door, and you look down, and at your feet are some black stones in the form of the Atlantic Ocean, bubbling up against you. And the day that I was there, that we were there, I tried, but it's impossible. Because the ocean is just the horizon. I tried to imagine what it must have felt like to find yourself chained and speechless, in the most serious sense of that word, on your way, where? I confess that for a minute, there were some tourists around who were French, and I almost hit one of them on the head. You know, they wouldn't have known why I was angry. But it hurt. Anyway, it was the black man's necessity, once he got here, to accept the cross, because he had to survive. To somehow manage to outwit his Christian master. Because what he faced when he got here was really the Bible and the gun. And that's all right, too. what is terrible in it is the fact that American white men are not prepared, first of all, to believe, for example, my version of this story, to believe that it happened. In order to avoid believing that, they have set up in themselves a fantastic system of evasions, denials, and justifications, which destroyed, or is about to destroy, their grasp of reality, which is another way of saying their moral sense. What I'm trying to say is that the crime is not the most important thing here. What makes our situation serious is that we have spent so many generations pretending that it did not happen. If you doubt me, ask yourself, on what assumptions rest those extraordinary questions that white men ask? No matter how politely, on what assumption rests the question, would you let your sister marry? It's based on some preoccupation in somebody's mind. God knows, I have never given any evidence of having a particular problem. I'm not interested in marrying your sister, my God. I mean that. On what assumption, again, rests the extraordinary question, what does a Negro want? This again comes out of some extraordinary preoccupation in the mind. Something entirely, if I may say so, divorced from reality. It's like saying what do seals eat, or I don't know. It's as unreal can be. When a baby cries, you don't ask the baby what it wants. You find out, you change the baby's diaper. That's what you do, You don't run to your next door neighbor and say, what does my baby want? Now let's go back for a minute to where I started. Let's go back to Nietzsche. I stand before my highest mountain and before my longest journey, and therefore must I descend deeper than I have ever before descended. And we spoke a little earlier about the necessity, when the collision between your terms in life occurs, of saying yes to life. That's the descent. The difference between a boy and a man is that a boy imagines there is some way to get through life safely. And a man knows he's got to pay his dues. In this country, the entire nation has always assumed that I would pay their dues for them. What it means to be a Negro in this country is that you represent, you are the receptacle of, you are the vehicle of disaster, sorrow, which white Americans think they can escape. This is what is meant, really what is meant, by keeping the Negro in his place. It is why white people, until today, are still astounded and offended if by some miscalculation they are forced to suspect that you are not happy in your place. This is absolutely true, and I'm not talking about the Deep South. People finally say to you, but you're so bitter. There's been in this country for a dangerously long time two levels of experience. One, to put it cruelly, but I think quite truthfully, can be summed up in the image of Doris Day and Gary Cooper. I think you know what they do. And the other, subterranean, indispensable, but denied, which can be summed up, let us say, in the tone of Ray Charles. And there's never been in this country any real confrontation between these two realities. Let me force you, or try to force you, to observe a paradox. Though all white Americans, in essence, essentially came from Europe, it is only American Negroes whom Europe understands. Let me spell that out. When the American Negroes in Europe, he and the people whom he finds himself among are able to establish a dialogue which white Americans have great difficulty establishing if they ever do. And the reason is very simple. The European and the black American know what it is to suffer, and Americans don't. Now the bill for this endeavor to get from the cradle to the grave, looking like Eisenhower, has now come in. White people are astounded by Birmingham. Black people aren't. White people are endlessly demanding to be reassured that Birmingham is really on Mars. They don't want to believe, still less to act on the belief, that what is happening in Birmingham, now I mean this, and I am not exaggerating. There are several thousand ways to kill a man. There's several thousand ways to be violent. They don't want to realize that there is not one step, 1 inch, morally or actually, there is no distance between Birmingham and Los Angeles. Now it is entirely possible that we may all go under. But until that happens, I prefer to believe that since the society is created by men, it can be remade by men. The price for this transformation is high. White people will have to ask themselves precisely why they found it necessary to invent a nigger. Because they invented him for reasons out of necessities of their own. And every white citizen of this country will have to accept the fact that he is not innocent because those dogs and those hoses, those crimes are being committed in your name. Black people well, we'll have to do something very hard too, but they've done it, some of it already, which is to allow the white citizen his first awkward steps toward maturity. But we have functioned in this country precisely that way for a very long time. We were the first psychiatrists in this country. If we can hang on just a little bit longer, all of us, we may make it. We've got to try. And I think that those are the conditions. Thank you.
First, I must report that there were over 100 questions asked, and we selected those that we thought were more pertinent, and also that those that we put aside those who were duplicates. The first one, Mr. Baldwin, reads, could you please comment on the Muslim situation and the significance of their movement?
The significance of the Muslim movement, it would seem to me, first of all, well, this is a complicated question and a complicated answer. A, the Muslim movement came about, exists, and begins to flourish because the American Republic has never honored any of its promises, repeat, any of its promises, to its black citizens. That is its first significance to me, in my mind. It has another significance. It is, at the moment, probably the only way that a black boy or a black girl let me go back. It is probably, if not the only way, one of the only ways that a black boy or a black girl can be invested with a pride in the fact of being black. And this is extremely important. The entire country, having lied, in fact, the entire white civilization, having lied about black people so long, until this very moment, this was absolutely inevitable. Now, I have no objection to that. See, this begins my objection. I am perfectly aware, or imperfectly aware, but I was born in a ghetto, raised there, and in fact, never left it. Really, no Negro ever does, if he stays in this country. I am perfectly aware, I think, of the demoralization and the despair and the destruction which is being bred in those ghettos every single hour of every single day. And I know how hard it is for any black person in this country to arrive at any sense of his own value. And yet, there are two ways to arrive at this sense. And this is perhaps rather slow. And yet, there are two ways to arrive at this sense. And this is perhaps rather subtle. I don't think it is, but perhaps it is. Maybe I think one of them is false, and one of them is true. What white people have done for all these generations is lie about themselves. And they put on the color of their skin a totally false value. They have said, in effect, for 2,000 years, they're better than everyone else in the world because they are white. And look at them. Look at the result. The spiritual, the actual political result is nothing more or less than a moral and a spiritual bankruptcy. Because it is not true that the color of the skin has any importance at all in a human life. And I know that it seems to, and I know that people have perished because of the color of their skin. But it is not because of the color of their skin, really. It is because of the value placed on it. It is because of what it means in the eyes of someone else or in their own eyes. I want, from the very bottom of my heart, that black people in this country arrive at a real sense of who they are. And I also understand that life being what it is, and power being what it is, that it is entirely possible that the world will have to align itself for the next 2,000 years on the basis of color with the roles reversed. Speaking only for myself, I would not like to see this happen. Speaking for myself, my objective to the Muslim movement is twofold. I do not see that they have an articulate program, by which I mean such things as a rent strike in Harlem. I mean a real revolution. And I do not want my nephew or my brother or my son to begin to believe that he is better than white people because he is black. I don't think that one needs to invent. I do not think the Negro people in this country have any need to invent a reason to be proud. They have achieved already They have achieved and endured and survived and triumphed over and turned to their advantage. Already, one of the cruelest inflictions in the history of mankind. I think that we have every right to be proud that our mothers and our fathers in fact, our forebears, carried washing on their heads, and even to be proud, I hope you understand what I mean, that they knew how to say yes sir and no ma'am, and get what they wanted anyway, that they outwitted this civilization to the extent that they took that cross and made it something it had never been before in this country. And they took that anguish and turned it into music. And they are the only people in this country, on the basis of the evidence, who have been able to produce children to walk through mobs to get to school. They are the only people in this country so far as a body who seem to have any sense of what America is about. And the American Revolution, if I may say so, depends entirely at the moment on their energy. Now this is a tremendous heritage, and I would not like to throw it away for an invented one.
Is there a relationship between the African independence movement and the present-day struggles of the Negro people in the United States today?
That's a complex question too, and it's mainly a question which the American government is determined not to face. We are living, whether or not J. Edgar Hoover likes it, in an age of revolution. There's nothing any of us can do about that, except say no or say yes. The 20 million Negroes in this country are not only involved and profoundly involved with the events, the revolution in Africa, but with the revolution all over the world. We have made, for the reasons I tried to outline when I was talking to you earlier, the profound mistake of thinking that when we speak, only we are listening. We have made the extraordinary mistake of assuming that what we think Cuba is what Cuba is. I don't know, and this is really what Bobby Kennedy has in mind when he asks for a cooling off period so he won't be embarrassed before the Russians. I don't know, speaking honestly, for example, and this is a very important example, but it's only an example. There are many, 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 many others. We can't stay here all night. I don't know, so far, a single Negro who knows for what reason he would go to Cuba to free the Cubans.
The next two questions I will ask Mr. Baldwin to ask together. The first one, what specific action can the Caucasian American take to achieve full human dignity? The next one, what specific political action can the Negro take to achieve full human dignity?
They would appear to be from the same person. I don't want to sound cruel. I'm not trying to be malicious, and I'm not trying to be clever. But it seems to me the first question especially, what specific action can the Caucasian American take to achieve full human dignity, occurs to me as being somewhat pathetic. I mean that.
Yep.
If I may be allowed to be rude for a moment, not very rude, but I'm trying to make a point. It reminds me of those people who run to doctors or other friends or I don't know. Anyway, the question comes up, what should I tell my child about sex? And I always think, don't you know yet? I don't think, if I may be harsh, that any white American has the right to such innocence. If you don't know what action you should take to achieve full human dignity, God knows I can't tell you. And the second question, what specific action, etc., can the American Negro take to achieve full human dignity, is allied to the first. Because obviously, if you don't know what you should do to become a human being, you can't imagine what I should do to become a human being. And it's part of our dilemma that such questions can be asked. The question has to be asked of someone else, not of me, of you.
What can you do? What can you do?
My son is 7.5 years old, a Negro. He thinks white people are greater than we are. What do I say?
Really?
That's a hard question. And again, I don't want to sound harsh, but it would seem to me that the question betrays a certain insecurity on the part of the woman or the man who asked it. If your child who's 7.5 thinks white people are greater than we are, it can't yet be because of white people, so it must be because of you.
There you go. Got to it pretty quick, huh?
So the only way to answer your kid's question is for you, I suspect, to cease trying to be white.
Do you believe that the Negro in America should or must limit his struggle to nonviolent action to achieve equality?
Should or must?
The Negro. The Negro.
Do I believe that the Negro in America should or must limit his... That's an extremely complex question. I'll try to tell it like it is for me. First of all, it's a question I cannot really answer because I have not answered it for myself. I don't know. That's the first thing I have to say. As far as nonviolence is concerned, I have in myself to think of it as an extremely effective strategy in some cases.
Right?
I have in myself personally, speaking now only for me, to prefer not to
Engage in violence.
fight physically if I can,
Right?
if I can avoid it.
If at all
On the other hand,
possible.
speaking only for myself again,
Right.
I know very well that I really am not nonviolent. And I know very well that if you try to kill me, I'm going to try to kill you.
There you go.
Now, the reason I have to put it that way
Yeah.
is because
Yep.
not
Defense is different than offense.
all American Negroes, and certainly not all students, are Martin Luther King. And when I say that, I do not mean in any way whatever the faintest disrespect for a man whom I admire and love very much and I consider to be a friend of mine. But Martin was an extremely rare person, especially in this civilization, because he really is a Christian. From that his moral force comes. It's also from that his trouble comes. Because the students, we speak only of the students at the moment, are not like Martin, and I don't, when I say that, mean to imply the faintest disrespect for the students either. What I am trying to say is that the strategy of nonviolence, which is extremely effective, as I say, in some situations, has been effective enough, for example, to precipitate a crisis in Birmingham, will probably have to be re-evaluated as a strategy because, and this is very important, Martin and the children, or even say we, if one likes, whoever has been really trying to do anything, has been operating. So let's use just Martin for the moment and the children. Martin and the children have been operating in an almost total vacuum. It would appear on the basis of the evidence that everyone in the country expects Martin and David Abernathy and a few other beleaguered ministers and a handful of children to do a very difficult job for them. One of the reasons that the strategy of nonviolence has to be overhauled, for example, is because neither the government nor the citizenry has shown any suspicion that this is their battle too. It is possibly time that the question which is posed to me, whether or not Negroes must or should stick to the tactic of nonviolence, the question should not be asked of Martin or of any student, any Negro student, or of me. The question has to be asked of the nation, because what happens now depends on what you do. It doesn't depend on Martin or on me. I may say right now, and Martin certainly says, that we are opposed to violence. But that does not mean there will not be violence. It is too late to be able to negotiate with any Negro leader
for many, many, many years, the technique of Mr. Charlie was to ask me, for example, in effect, we made a bond. I had to have books for the schoolhouse, let's say. And I had to go to Mr. Charlie to get them. And the tacit price I was paying for the books for the schoolhouse, which I had to have for the children, was that I would in some way control the children. Well, the negotiations had broken down to this extent forever that I cannot guarantee the docility of the children, thank God. Whether or not it becomes violent or remains non-violent depends entirely on this country. Thank you very much,
Not
Mr.
Trump or
Baldwin.
Biden. Bullshit. The country. Decide. Do something different. Oh, it's a good idea, Canada. We should do that too. Alright, good night.
Now, we're all here
What? What is this here?
tonight, and for many nights to come, and for many nights
There's always
previous.
tomorrow.
I mean, no matter what I say, we're all here in the context of a terrifying,
We'll pick
a
up here
terrible
tomorrow.
disturbance